Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Wolves. Welcome back to another match preview. The fixtures are coming thick and fast in the Premier League. It's another game on the road as we face off against Nottingham Forest tomorrow evening under the lights. Hoping that Wolves can find some sort of result. It's been 3 defeats on the bounce now for Wolves, despite a really positive start to 2026. And of course, a lot of negativity about the last couple of performances in particular as well. But here's hoping that we can get something out of this game, especially as we head towards an FA Cup game during the weekend as well. But as always, I'll give my thoughts, the latest from Rob Edwards' pre-match press conference, and we'll get the thoughts from the Forest fan George later on in the video as well. But Wolves hoping to bounce back from what was a really frustrating and disappointing afternoon of football at Molineux on Saturday. A 3-1 defeat to Chelsea. However, the manner of every single goal conceded was so frustrating. I gave my thoughts on the match reaction. If you haven't caught our podcast as well, we dissected the game and result a little bit more there as well. But just the stupidity of some of the mistakes, the defensive errors that we put out on Saturday was so frustrating to watch. Second half performance was a little bit better, but I don't think you can read too much into it, especially as you would assume Chelsea took their foot completely off the gas. But we're hoping to bounce back, and I mentioned it on the podcast, and also Rob Edwards echoed something similar today in his pre-match press conference. And I feel like the pressure is very much on Nottingham Forest at the moment. Results are going against them, both in their own favour, like they're losing games, or their form is just a little bit inconsistent. And West Ham, who are breathing down their neck, have picked up form and won 3 of their last 4. So the fixtures probably favour Forest a little bit more this week as they play us, and Manchester United are against West Ham United. So they may get that little bit of space back. But pressure is very much on them, I would say. And it feels a little bit similar to when we played West Ham United earlier on this year. The first game, I think it was, of 2026, where Nuno was under a lot of pressure. They were coming to Molineux. The pressure was off us, really. It was almost like a free hit, and we beat them quite comfortably in the end. So it feels like it could be like that. However, Wolves have really got to turn up, and Forest may turn up. Sean Dyche in charge, bit of pressure on him. He knows there's a massive job to do. He'll get his players up for this game, so it will be difficult. Now, in regards to team news, some people will be pleased to know. However, Hwang is injured and he will be out for this game. He picked up a knock towards the back end of the Chelsea game on Saturday. I say the back end, I think it was the back end of the first half, because we looked a lot better in the second half. Rob Edwards has said he's going to be out for at least a few weeks. It sounds like a calf issue. Totti Gomez also going to be out injured for this game. He's still out, although back in light training now, we believe. And Andre will have a late fitness test. He was out of the squad completely against Chelsea on Saturday as well. In terms of team lineup, it will be interesting to see what happens. Of course, Rob Edwards went with the back 4. I think he tried to defend his decision a little bit in his pre-match press conference today, but we all know that it didn't quite go to plan. I don't think the stupidity of the players helped, because it was 2 completely avoidable penalties that we gave away. And obviously, when you're playing a back 4, you're trying something different. I don't think the back 4 was the sole reason we lost that game 3-1, to be honest. I think it was those stupid errors. So Rob could go with that. However, being away from home, I would expect us to go with a back 5. I would expect us to revert back to something very similar to what we've seen. This is my predicted lineup on the screen here. Jose Sarr in goal. It would be a back 3. If it is a back 5, it would be the back 3 of Santi Bueno, Kelechi and Mosquera again. Right wing back, I would say, would be Rodrigo Gomez. I'd reintroduce him. Left wing back, Hugo Bueno. Didn't have his best game against Chelsea, to be honest, so there is every chance that maybe Muller-Wolfer could come back in there. But I would say maybe Hugo would stick with, keep his place. And now Angel Gomez, there was no mention of him, so I'd assume he's going to be fit and available to start in the midfield alongside João Gomez and Matheus Mane in there as well, who could easily push forward slightly into a front 3 alongside Adam Armstrong and Tolu Arokadare. But let me know your thoughts on that 11, because that's how I feel he could go. However, like I said, Muller-Wolf probably with an outside shout. Maybe Jean-Luc de Bellegarde as well could come in as a swap for Hwang and start in a front 3. But we'll wait and see. Will Rob surprise us and stick to his guns and stick with a back 4? I think away from home you probably go a little bit safer, but we'll wait and see. But as always, guys, it's great to catch up with George to get his thoughts and feelings on Nottingham Forest so far this season, and of course whether he's worried about a possible relegation battle between now and the end of the campaign. So then, guys, it's great to get George back onto the channel to give the Forest perspective ahead of this week's game. Another midweek trip to Forest. George, how you been keeping, man? Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, all good, mate. Good, thanks. Hope you're okay.
Yeah, all good. I mean, just before I click record, then it's not actually been too long since we last played Forest, but it feels like so much has happened in that sort of 2 months or so. I know when we last spoke, Sean Dyche had just been appointed as the Forest manager. I know there were early doubts about him, but I think at the time you were sort of confident in giving him that opportunity. Has your opinion changed, or do you think are you still sort of on that same bus of giving him a little bit more time and more of a chance?
I've been very to and fro about what to think about him, to be honest. I'm certain on the fact that whatever happens, he's got to go at the end of the season. I think if we're going to progress as a football club, the only way he stays, I think, is if we go down. Because if we go down, he's probably a decent manager to bring us back up. But if we're in the Premier League next season, there is no way we can progress with Sean Dyche because he doesn't seem to be able to motivate the players in certain instances. They perform very well against the big sides, but then we play teams like you or West Ham or teams that are around us, and we just cannot seem to get up for the fight. So that's got to come from him. And his tactics are just boring. He doesn't influence games at all from the bench. But I think because he's not as bad as Ange Postecoglou, and he at least plays a way that does kind of suit the players, he's been given more of a chance. So I was firmly Dyche out a few weeks ago. He sort of scraped a few results together that makes me think, all right, give him till the end of the season. I'm still not confident he'll keep us up, but I think changing it now and getting a fourth style of play and a fourth manager in maybe isn't the answer. So beyond this season, certainly not. But I think there's no other real person to take us forward between now and then, to be honest.
Yeah, I think weirdly, I remember we had that conversation at the start of December, and I think I said at the time it's maybe a safe appointment, but not a long-term appointment. I think I probably used a phrase similar to sort of he's almost got a ceiling.
Yeah,
I don't think he was ever going to return you back into that European football stage, but he should keep you in the Premier League. But that gap now, George, is just 3 points. I mean, West Ham. It's unlikely, I think, based on the fixtures this week, but West Ham could go level on points with you guys this week. But, they've certainly closed that gap. However, there are teams like Leeds. I mean, suppose you could put Tottenham Hotspur in that space as well, although I think they should have enough quality to keep themselves out of it. But what's your sort of thoughts between now and the end of the season then? Is there a growing concern now amongst the Forest fan base about Premier League survival?
definitely. Yeah, I think now it's between us and West Ham, to be honest. I thought Palace were in it. They looked awful against us, but they beat Brighton, and obviously I think Brighton are now below them. So Brighton
Yeah.
probably come into the conversation as well. They're in horrible form. I think Forest are, as much as I am worried, and we've got sort of every element of a relegation side, we make one change to our defence and we suddenly look like we're a different team, let alone three that we had to make at at Leeds, which isn't sustainable. If you lose somebody through suspension or injury, then all the game plan goes out the window, and you can't do that. A sort of positive from that game were a couple of new signings that came off the bench and looked all right. So if they can come through, then maybe. But I think what gives me confidence is that West Ham obviously have sort of won three of the last four, but it seems that they're just in a patch of good form, and that looks like a good
Yeah.
end, and then they could, fall off a cliff again. Whereas we've been inconsistent, but we've been consistently picking up points between games. We've got a point, then three, then lost a couple, but then picked up a point. We've not gone on a long run winless under Sean Dyche, so that's what makes me think we might get out of it. But I can't see us going on a sort of run that West Ham have gone on. So if they can carry that on, then we are in some serious trouble. And 3 points is the biggest the gap has been. Sorry, the smaller the gap has been for a long time. So if we come out of this weekend with it more, which we can, I'm positive. But I don't think any of us are kind of our chickens, and we all know that anything can happen at Forest.
Yeah, I mean the Premier League table. You mentioned some of the other teams there. I think a couple of game weeks in that league table, especially that middle pack is so tight.
Yeah.
It can drag anybody into that. And a couple of good weeks of Forest and a couple of bad weeks for teams 4 or 5 places above them. It can completely switch. In regards to the sort of playing squad at the moment, though, I know there's certain players that have been performing for you historically that maybe haven't quite been at the races for the majority of this season. I'll mention Morgan Gibbs-White because obviously he tends to be the talk of this fixture. How's he been? And anyone else that has actually stood up and looking like they're standing out for Forest so far this season?
Yeah, Morgan's always the standout on the eye anyway. He's always involved in everything we do. So whether he plays well or whether he plays poorly, he's always a talking point because he's never somebody to shy away from it. So on the whole, he's been positive. He's had a few off games. I think in the Europa League, he's actually cost us a place in the top 8 because he missed 2 penalties that if he'd have scored, we'd have had 5 more points, I'm pretty sure, and would have been through. But on the whole, he's been his spearheading. So particularly the last month, he's been one of our better performers, digging in deep where it matters. And the other one for me has been Ibrahim Sangare. He's been the unsung hero in midfield because obviously Gibbs White catches the eye. Anderson's the one that's playing for England and getting all the headlines in that regard. But Sangare is just the glue between the three of them. He connects defence from attack. He's mobile. He's got a brilliant array of passing. He's really grown in his defensive work as well. And we lost him for AFCON for 3 or 4 games, and we went from beating Tottenham 3-0 to being absolutely shocking in some games following that. So Sangare, for me, has become our most important performer. We look consistently better when he's in the team. And the other one is Murillo, to be fair. Murillo's obviously been missing I think he's missed 8 games this season. We've only managed to pick up 4 points without him. So the 2 players key to our success are Murillo and Sangare, and without both of them playing, Forest just look completely incapable of picking up points. Murillo missed the Leeds game, so you guys will be hoping, I think, that he's out, because that'll give you a far better chance. But I think he should be back in for that game, and if not, I will be worried.
Yeah, I was just having a look because I think Dyche had his pre-match press conference. I was just going to see if there was anything mentioned, but I can't see anything of note. So, I suppose we'll wait and see there. In terms of the January transfer window as well, I know that Forest made a couple of signings. Were you happy with that? I know that the sort of goalkeeper situation because of injuries needed to be addressed. The striker situation, I think you've really struggled for a constant source of goals, obviously with Chris Wood out as well. Signed Lorenzo Luca, who's a favourite for me with my football manager background. I used to sign Lorenzo a few times. And obviously the Ortega coming in as well. Were you happy with the January business from Forest, or do you think it needed a bit more?
If you look at the ins and outs, then it looks like a good window. We've replaced where we needed to, with the one exception being midfield. We obviously had Douglas Luiz on loan from Juventus. Wasn't really fitting into our style. Villa and Chelsea wanted him. We had a clause that meant if he started 15 games, we'd have to buy him. Forest didn't want to do that, so it made sense to get rid of him. Now, we didn't then replace him, which is a huge sort of question mark because Yates has struggled with injury this season. Sangare's been away. So it would be logical to replace him. Forest didn't do that, so we're a body down going into the latter stages of the Europa League and the Premier League. But the planning was just pathetic, really. It was pretty abysmal. So we came into the window, obviously in the Europa League, Chris Wood and Igor Jesus and Arno Calawendo were the 3 strikers in our Europa League squad. Chris Wood is injured and has been all season pretty much. So we only had Jesus and Calawendo. Jesus had bookings in the Europa League. Now, on the 4th of January, we sent Calawendo out on loan, which left us with 1 striker in the squad and in the Premier League squad at that time as well, because him and Awoniyi were struggling for form. So you'd expect Forest to then be signing a striker the next day, wouldn't you, to replace him? Well, it took us 21 days to sign Luca to replace him, which meant when we lost to Braga, we had to play Dan Ndoye, who is a winger who struggled for form out wide. We had to play him through the middle. So that's just poor planning there. The one thing that did plan well was Ortega. Ortega came in before Sels got injured, and then halfway through the game after Ortega was announced, Sels got injured. So that was quite ironic that happened. So, and we signed Luca Netz, a sort of deadline day signing that on the face of it looks all right, but why did we wait the whole of the transfer window to make a signing that was obvious that we needed to happen? Because we lost Zinchenko, who was on loan, struggled to replace him because he was not in the squad for 2 weeks before that. And then on deadline day, we had a deal move through, so we just rushed the next signing through. So we've sort of replaced in areas that we needed to, apart from in midfield, but the whole planning comes into question because why it doesn't seem the club were ready for January, which the people in recruitment definitely should be.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very familiar. We have that. I know a lot of Wolves fans listening to this know that, that's happened to us time and time again where we're letting players go. And you would hope as a football fan, and you'd think you wouldn't sanction those deals unless somebody was waiting there almost with the shirt in their hand ready to have their photos taken. It is frustrating. Our planning has been a little bit better, but we've been letting players go even after the January transfer window's closed. I think Wolves obviously have one eye on next season anyway and trying to maximise the amount of money they're getting for those players. What's your thoughts as a neutral, George? I'm not expecting you to have sat here and watched every single Wolves game, but obviously we're in an even worse position than what we were in when we first spoke, although we do have a few more points on the board anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wolves are in a very similar position to a lot of teams over the last few years, but I think you're far better than, think of Southampton or you think of, teams that have gone down, bottom of the league with very few points. I mean, until sort of Chelsea and recently, I don't think you guys were losing games heavily. It was just sort of the odd narrow loss that kept repeating itself. So, I mean, I think you're certainly probably the worst team in the league, but I don't think you're, by any stretch of the imagination, one of the worst ever Premier League teams. And I think there has been an element of unluckiness about your season. So it does look unfortunate, like it's going one way, and it'll be a complete miracle, obviously, if you get out of it. I think you've got to win over half your games, is that right? And it seems quite
Probably.
competitive in the sort of region that Forest are as well. You look at the last few seasons, about 30 points has been enough to keep you up, but I think that looks like it'll be towards 35 this year, which shows the standard has grown with the new promoted teams being competitive. So it's just unlucky that you've had such a poor season and everybody else around you's had a much better season than teams around you have recently. But I think, like you say, the January business was quite clever, getting nearly 50 million or whatever it was for Strand Larsen when, if you went down, you're probably looking at 20. It looks like really good business. Armstrong, I don't think was the best signing. I know he's been out of form in the Championship, but he's a proven Championship striker and he'll bring that experience next season. So it was maybe a surprise to see Wolves in that position with how you ended the season with Pereira and stuff. Well, I suppose started the season, it didn't end that well, did it, last year? And it sort of spiralled into the season, I think. So it wasn't a huge surprise. I think maybe how bad you have been has been a surprise. Could be well equipped maybe for the Championship next season, and you've certainly got a manager who has shown he can do it in that league as well.
Yeah, Angel Gomez as well
Yeah.
started for us. I think he's very good friends with Morgan, so that'll be interesting to see those two up against each other tomorrow evening as well. I suppose, George, I mean, we don't really want to break Derby's record points, and I suppose Forest would like to see Derby have that record point. So any chance that we can maybe have some points tomorrow, perhaps?
Well, as much as preserving Derby's record is one of our priorities, I think the main priority is our Premier League survival. So, particularly if West Ham beat Man United tonight and come level with us, there'll be no favours. Although it wouldn't surprise me if Forest handed out favours. That's the type of club we are, really.
Yeah. Score prediction, what do you think, mate?
I don't know. I'm never confident. I think it'd be so Forest to just choke in this situation, and then we've got Man City in a few weeks, go and beat Man City, but fail to beat bottom of the league. So I'll say 1-1. I always say a draw, I think, when we play each other. So 1-0.
To be fair, our form at your place, other
right.
than obviously you beat us in the Carabao Cup on penalties, but in normal time we've got a fantastic record at your place in terms of avoiding defeats. But
There's been a lot
I think this is
of
probably
1-1s and stuff over the years.
yeah. I think the 1-1's probably a safe bet, but it's probably one of the first times Forest have got a really, other than last season. Obviously, I think it was a 1-1 draw on the Saturday.
Early in the
Forest
took that one, I think.
Yeah, Forest should have an advantage over Wolves, but we'll wait and see. George, thanks for jumping on again. Where can people find you and your content if they wish?
Yeah, thank you, mate. 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and it's thefamousclub.co.uk.
Perfect, mate. Thanks a lot. And apart from tomorrow, mate, all the best for the rest of the season. Hopefully, I'll catch up soon.
Cheers, Dave.
So big thanks to George. I'll make sure I leave links to him and his podcasts in the description down below. Always great to catch up with him. And let me know your thoughts and score predictions, guys, as well in the comment section down below. We'll be back after the game with my match reaction and the fans react. If you want to catch up and get our thoughts from after the Chelsea game, the thoughts going into this game and the Grimsby game, go and check out the podcast if you want something a little bit more long form. And yeah, as always, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.